He got his ass chewed out so bad he ended up quitting. Pro-Revenge on Reddit Rundown. We have 3 interesting revenge stories for your entertainment today. Don't forget to thumbs up and subscribe if you enjoyed today's video. First story. I recruited an unwitting army to annoy an asshole. Back in the early 90s, my friend, I'll call him Lou, because that's his name, was selling his RX-7 via an ad in the old print auto trader. It came out every Thursday, so that first weekend was critical for sales. The very first guy that came to see it on Saturday said he wanted to buy after driving it. Of course, he had to finance, so they couldn't finish the sale during the weekend. Lou was worried about losing all the bites from the new ad, so he asked for a deposit of $500. The guy wrote a check. Lou told the rest of the callers that weekend that it was sold and, unfortunately, didn't ask for their numbers in case it fell through. This story predates caller ID availability in my area by a couple years, so those leads were gone. As you surely expect by now, the guy flakes on Monday and Lou deposits the check. Payment stopped. Big surprise. Sitting around my apartment, we schemed revenge, but all we had to go on was the check. Lucky for karma, there was a phone number printed on it. Our first idea was to write a little program to dial his number repeatedly from my modem, but that would be easily stopped and probably get us in direct trouble. Then Lou got a page from his work. This was back in the one-way pager days. You call the pager's dedicated phone number, it sounds a tone, then you punch digits for the number you want to be sent to the pager. The person with pager receives the number you entered and, presumably, calls it. Everyone with a pager made sure that people who needed to get a hold of them had the number for their pager. You'd see pager numbers in print and TV ads all the time for various services. Boom! Angelic choir sings, heavenly light goes off. Lou's pager number and my pager number had the same prefix, middle 3 digits. What if we randomly dial numbers with that prefix and page them all to this guy's number? So, we order a pizza, open some beers, and start looking through the yellow pages at locksmiths and tow truck services to find more pager prefixes. We wind up with a dozen or so. After that, it's half an hour of coding in ye olde Borland C++. I put together a program that would cycle through our list of known prefixes and add a random final 4 digits to get a random pager. It calls the pager's number, pauses, then dials this asshole's number and throws a 911 suffix on there for good measure, which is something people with pagers understood to indicate an emergency of some kind. The whole thing was just generating a string like 8T602XCI, 911 hash, where 30 is the pager prefix and YI is random. Commas make pauses, since you need to connect to the paging service before you can enter the message. Make string, send to modem, wait for no carrier, hang up, repeat. We start eating the pizza and let it fly. I was very picky about my devices, so my modem was a US robotics courier. You could set an S register to control how long it would sound each tone when dialing. Uber nerds like myself would keep tinkering with that to get it as fast as possible while still being recognized by the phone service. It was very fast. I swag it could run through 4 pages per minute, so this guy would get 240 calls/hour. We just watched it run and laughed our asses off. We realized pretty early on that we didn't really know if it was working, so we wandered down to the 7-Eleven and called him from a payphone, just in case he could somehow trace it or the popo were on the case and watching. A man answered and I said, "Hello, I got a page at this number." I heard an audible sigh and then he just hung up. Gold. We ended up running it for a few hours, then let it go quiet for a few days. Then we scheduled it to start dialing in the middle of the night every few days, plus we'd fire it up by hand randomly whenever we had a party. We checked again from the 7-Eleven after a week and it went to an answering machine, which did the rapid tone at the end of the greeting to indicate the tape was full. We reasoned that the line was still ringing, anyway, so we kept it for another month or so. Eventually, we got the disconnected warning when we made one of our regular checkups. I'm sure he just changed the number. I like to think about that guy answering the phone after a few days of silence when we started it up. I can vividly imagine his response at the "Did someone page me to this number?" as he slams the phone down and then it rings again a few seconds later. Or, of course, coming home from work and having an answering machine full of random people asking about being paged. And, yeah, we annoyed several thousand people into calling this guy by the end. But each of those people was only put out for a single call. A cost, yes, but a necessary one for justice. Second story. I did to my neighbor what they did to others. To start, I bought a house with the intention of doing a flip. When I moved in, the self-appointed block captain let me know who they were the first day. Sadly, they were my next-door neighbors. I tried to be friendly, but listening to them I realized how horrible they were and tried to still be civil. My significant other kept saying just wait for it to be our turn. They bragged about, though, their contacts with the city, forcing people to make improvements on their houses, getting undesirable renters out of the houses, and just harassing people in general. As I worked on flipping my house, the wife became a worse thorn in my side. To start, she demanded I put up a fence so people would quit cutting through my yard and scaring her. Then, her and the husband demanded I take care of the weeds in the yard or they will do it and bill me. After that, a storm, a tree scraped their shingles and they asked for $1,200 to replace them. The tree was there before I moved in, and by co-ed they are responsible to cut back the branches to the property line. When I wouldn't pay, they had a relative jump my fence and cut the trees down. Needless to say, I began to ignore to them, so she became a constant gnat and moved on to another target. Then one day, as I was tearing down my deck for a patio, I realized she put a feral cat colony on a section of my property. I had wondered why all the stray cats were around, and I finally found out. I reached out to the city and demanded it be removed, but they said she followed the law on getting it in place. As I tried to get it shut down, she began unhinged behavior, from standing in her window staring at me, yelling out the window at me, to hitting the fence with items to scare my dog. Here is where my revenge started. I started by filing an HRO, harassment restraining order, against the wife and had it granted ex parte with the evidence I provided, or course she contested as it was defamatory to her character. Before the hearing, the husband tried to physically intimidate me. So, I filed one against him and it was also granted ex parte. In the hearing it came up that there was an HRO against the husband as well. They dodged being served until I had it published as a means of service. I started to make complaints about them and their house. Also, I made police calls when necessary. As I did this, the other neighbors began to realize they could do to them what they had done to them and others. For example, as I was having my front door replaced, needing a building work permit. I knew they were doing internal remodeling, so I called a city inspector and they were fined for not having permit. As she ran it at the inspector, he looked at my window and saw I had mine displayed. Their back porch became hoarded, so I made another call to a city inspector and they had to clear it out. Then they had a broken window on the porch door, so I called an inspector and they had to replace the door. Next, the paint on their house was peeling, so I called an inspector and they had to repaint. The inspector also found the wood underneath was rotted along with their front porch was sloping. So, they needed to fix the front porch, sections of wood, and repaint. Through all this they had up cameras to prove they were not doing the things I said, i.e., hitting the fence. They also pointed a camera at my backyard. As it was legal to point a camera into my yard and a part of my HRO was her intrusive watching behaviors, I gave the camera the middle finger on my way to and from my garage. When she complained, with the city tiring of her, their response was she was admitting to intrusively watching me. The fight over the cat colony came to an end when I realized one of the cats had a serious disease and I began to capture them and turn them into animal control. Don't worry, animal control was part of the feral cat program, so they would not be put down, but the neighbor would have to pay a fine to get each cat out or have the colony closed. Finally, I caught the sick one and it had rabies. Part of the program was for her to capture each new cat, have it vaccinated. Something she admitted to willing not doing on her GoFundMe for the colony. I soon had the GoFundMe shut down when I provided the evidence she was not using the funds as she stated they were going to be used. The city now had to act to close the colony. The person at Animal Control who wouldn't respond to my complaints was fired. The neighbors called in a city mediator who we met with, presented all the evidence and said we would not meet with them, and provided extremely racist tweets they made about neighbors. The city cut ties with them as community leaders. With their power to bully gone and having spent what I can only imagine in fines and repairs, like they did to numerous other neighbors. After 14 years they sold their house and moved out, way out to the suburbs where they only have one neighbor about 50 yards away. They knew I was wrapping up my flip and would be out in less than a year. Without being able to bully their neighbors, with people having their back, they seemed to have no further reason to stay. Needless to say, I did several more things to wear them down. Finally, when I listed my house, it was sold while theirs was still on the market. As a final FU to them, I reported to the county they had both the new and old house listed as their homestead, meaning they were paying less in property taxes, so they got hit in with more fines on my way out. Third story. Fired from last job, but I got the last laugh. Pardon the format, I'm on mobile. I worked at a retail chain that sold pet supplies and products. When I started working there, it was great, family owned, and everyone I worked with was fantastic. The owners eventually wanted to retire and sold the small chain to an investment group. Once the investment group took over, almost all but a few employees were let go, forced out, or just quit. I hung on for a little while longer before I got promoted at my other job. New company brings in new manager to my store. My store was the top performing store in the entire chain, bringing in about $10,000, $12,000 per day on average. It was always more on weekends and especially around the holidays. The new manager is a Mr. Company man. Company told him they only want employees around for 2 to 3 years, myself and 2 others had been there 10+ years. So naturally he began ruffling feathers and giving us all a hard time. Unfortunately, he decided on me first. Mr. Company man found out I worked 2 jobs. The 2 jobs are not in related fields, so there was no chance of any conflicts of interest on my end. However, my second job requires me to work nights and weekends. When Mr. Company man found this out, he demanded I work nights/weekends there, so it was fair for everyone. I didn't work nights and weekends there because I was that store's only OSHA certified forklift operator, and deliveries didn't come at night, they came weekday mornings, every day. Mr. Company man didn't want to hear that, and told me I either had to work nights and weekends, or that day would be my last day. I told him, don't threaten me with a good time, I suppose today is my last day then. I was pretty pissed about that, but it's not a big deal now, ended up being the greatest thing that ever happened to me. I went home early, didn't finish my shift, because fuck 'em. But when I got home, I decided to call my local OSHA inspector and report them for not having a certified operator on staff, as well as numerous other hazards. Needless to say, they lost close to 3 weeks' profit from all the violations the inspector found. I was surprised they even showed up. In my state, the inspector will call you back after an inspection and tell you if your claims were founded or not. Mine were. And Mr. Company man got his ass chewed out so bad he ended up. Thanks for listening to Reddit Rundown, give a thumbs up and subscribe, and help me get to 1,000 subs. Leave a comment below on what kind of topics or stories you would like to hear. You can also check out other videos on my channel. Thanks and have an awesome day.